Alright, here we go. Here's the first one. Let's see if anybody wants to listen to some filthy casual hack from New York talk about video games. So the first one I picked is a weird one because it's one that I didn't really like that much, but I also had a good time with, and one that I was excited to play. So this one is Dead Island 2, and it's a miracle that this game was even released, given the fact that it was contracted to 3 different developers. Right? Deep Silver, as a publisher, treated this IP with such reverence, it's crazy. I don't understand. It needed to go through 3 developers? I mean, they technically forced Techland to just open their cheeks and just fart out Dead Island Riptide 2, 2 years after the first, which was supposed to be DLC, by the way, Riptide. And every company, though, at the time, was trying to do that. This is the Call of Duty Activision era. You know, thank you, Bobby Kotick. I hope your wife is pegging you on a beach somewhere right now. But, you know, Assassin's Creed was doing this. You know, like I said, it was Call of Duty. He did the same thing with Guitar Hero series. But, like, it's just funny that Deep Silver was like, no, this is our cherished IP. Okay, we have to get this right. You know, even though they forced Techland to just, you know, push out this sequel 2 years after the first that made no real changes. You know, there were some improvements, but 3 developers, I guess, I don't know. It is what it is. But they tried to milk the crap out of this IP. You know, the cow that they milked really should file assault charges. And look, it's a miracle this game was released. Again, you know, not to harp on that stuff, but it's great that Dambusters got this game out, despite what happened, which was clearly development hell. And they even said themselves at some point that they didn't want to make this game too complex. They wanted to keep it simple, and that probably helped them get this game out. But the game does suffer for it when compared to the first game. So, the first game came out at a time when the zombie game craze that lasted for a while was just starting to get going. It was Dead Rising in 07, Left 4 Dead in 08, and it was a fun game. It was just a fun game. The combat was fun. Each character had a theme and their own skill trees. You could build craft. For example, Perna, who I played in the first Dead Island, was good with firearms, and she could, you know, improve her healing and heal other characters. Logan was the tank one, or maybe Sam B was the tank, and Logan was the thrown weapons guy. But there was a lot to like about that game, and what I wanted from Dead Island 2 was an expansion on the ideas of the first game that I really enjoyed. The character skill trees, the weapon modding synergy. The story in the first game was trash. It wasn't well acted. It was corny. It was dumb. It was C-movie level stuff. But it was a fun game that married combat with weapon and build crafting. And again, having a game come out, I don't know how many years later it was supposed to, and to just have it come out at all is great. But for us casuals, we don't have a lot of time. This is like the perfect game for us because we don't have 96 hours in a day to play things. I have a house, I have a kid, I have a job. What I wanted was for this to be a good game that I could enjoy for a few hours. That I had, like, at the end, that was good, it was worth it, I enjoyed it as a sequel to a game series I really liked. And look, the combat is really good. It's the best part about this game, and we'll get more into that with the questions for casual segment. But you know, the flesh system, part of the combat system, really made it so that you viscerally feel the combat. You poke them in the stomach, and their guts, and their lunch falls out. You know, you're cutting off arms and heads and legs. Slashes appear where they should on their bodies. They crawl on the ground after you cut their legs off, like that old woman from the Life Alert commercials. You know, it's like, help me, I've fallen and I can't get up. Meanwhile, her grandson is sitting on the couch in the living room eating Chef Boyardee out of a can, watching Squid Game and saying, just press the button! Or whatever. You know, it's really, you know, there's finishers and heavy attacks. There's a lot to enjoy when fighting zombies. And the game just looks gorgeous the whole time. The environments really shine. The graphics are really impressive. And the combat is fun. You know, it's flawed, but it's fun. There's something with the combat where if you hit a zombie, they react to it. But there's certain times where you hit them and they just don't react and they just kind of go through with their attack. which I don't understand. But you know, sometimes the timing of the blocking or the dodging, even if you do it perfectly, it doesn't register. But at a certain point, look, if you're a casual player, what you want to do is you want to pick a character with a high toughness. Don't pick who I picked, which was Amy. Don't pick Bruno. Just pick somebody with a high toughness. Get one of every elemental weapon mod and carry a ranged weapon. And just beeline the story. The story is nothing. You know, if you like the story, you'll probably enjoy the side missions. I didn't really, so I just didn't have any interest in doing the side missions. They do provide ways for you to level up through the game, and you gain access to new mods and stuff like that. So if you're struggling with the combat, maybe do some side missions, and that could kind of help you get through the game. I found myself falling behind a bit because I wasn't doing side missions. But anyway, as you level up, you'll gain access to new abilities, which are these skill cards. There's no skill trees in this game, but most of these skill cards are just little bonuses, such as if you dodge perfectly, you gain health. Some are a little more involved than that, you know, if something's on cooldown or whatever, but I barely remember these things after my time playing. I wasn't build crafting too much. I wasn't thinking about it so much. I was just picking, okay, this sounds cool, I'll take it. I wasn't trying to look for some kind of synergy between everything. It's not interesting. It has no depth. It's probably, for me, the most disappointing aspect of the game, coming from somebody who wanted to enjoy the character building. I mean, it's got Chihuahua piss puddle level depth to it. And, you know, like I said, if you're a casual like me, pick a character with high toughness. Don't pick Amy. Don't pick Bruno. Mod your weapons with one of each element. Carry a ranged weapon. What I also forgot to mention about the combat are the curveballs, which are these side items or side weapons that you can select. Pipe bombs, throwing stars, molotovs, throwing knives, things like that. You can have 2 of them equipped at a time, and you could switch between the 2 of them. You also don't have to craft them, and they have a cooldown, and they're pretty powerful. So that's another change to the combat that I actually liked and I thought was a smart decision. But just going back to the mods that I mentioned before, it's having one of each element and stuff. It's very similar to Dead Island 1. They're not breaking the mold or anything. The system is not really that in-depth either, and given that Dead Island 1 came out in 2011, and you have all of this time that's passed, I feel like they really should have evolved that system a bit and just added more to it. It's very basic. It doesn't really do much. It's not interesting, you know. In Dead Island 1, you had skill trees, and you kind of coordinated between your skills, your weapons, and your mods. But because the skill tree and the mods don't have any depth to it, it just doesn't really feel all that great. In addition, the zombie types that you're fighting are also pretty generic. I mean, we've been seeing the same zombie types since 2008 with Left 4 Dead. It's the same variations you're familiar with. They're not breaking the fucking mold here, and that's essentially the meta theme of this game. You know, the story is meant to be tongue-in-cheek and not to be taken seriously, but there is a clever satirical way it could have been told. You know, the Grand Theft Auto games do a great job of this by being goofy and bombastic, but the subtext is all about saying something about the current state of American society. But the mods, the skill trees, the zombie types, even the weapons, it's not breaking the mold. They're not really being innovative here at all. The graphics are great in this game, like I mentioned before, but the locations themselves, despite looking great, they feel small and constrained compared to Dead Island 1. That's not what I wanted. You know, they could have gone had a larger district type thing like the first game, similar to what Borderlands does. You know, just for reference, the gameplay that you're watching, that I have on the screen, is from the Neighborhood Watch mode. This mode is actually a lot of fun. You choose between 3 Slayers that you can level up, just like in the story mode, and as you continually play the game, they'll get access to new talents. The talents between them are not that in-depth at all. Similarly to the skill cards, there's not much here, but there is something. You can lay traps, you can run around and collect materials, you can collect money, then you can buy and sell and mod your weapons between the days. So the neighborhood watch mode takes place over 5 days, and so each day you do a mission, and in between the days is where you can kind of buy and sell and do all that stuff. But it's a really great way. The reason why I chose to show this kind of gameplay, it's a great way of showing you what you're going to be doing in Dead Island 2, which is doing a mission, running around collecting materials, fighting zombies. That's pretty much it. So on the 5th day in Neighborhood Watch mode, you lay traps, use what weapons and perks you've accumulated, which you can get rewarded with by completing the missions. And then you have to protect 3 barricaded doors and see how long you can last through waves and waves of zombies. So again, showing gameplay for this mode is a great way to see what this game is really about, what you're going to be doing in this game. This footage is, you know, it's got all my mistakes in it. It's got all whatever dumb shit I did. It's all in there. I died. But it really, having unedited gameplay, I think is a better way of showing a game. Especially as I'm talking about the game, you know, in depth. So it's really, I mean, if there's one thing that you should do, is play this mode. It gets very repetitive very quickly. It's the same missions all the time. It's the same area, but it is a lot of fun, especially if you have friends with you. The map design for this area also is pretty good. You know, the focus on combat and exploration. You're not getting distracted by the story or things you have to backtrack for, which is another part of this game that was clearly meant to stretch the already short playtime. Which again, you know, I'm not necessarily complaining about it, but if it's good and it's short, it's okay. If it's not good and short, well, then that's, you know, what Patches O'Houlihan from Dodgeball would say is a poopy flavored lollipop. So what I would recommend is playing that mode. That's the mode that I had the most fun with. So that pretty much sums up my feelings overall for this game, and we'll just break into it a little bit more in depth with the questions for casual segment. Alright, the questions for casuals, they're questions that help us noobs parse our feelings and understanding of the game. It helps me figure out how I think about something by asking myself certain questions about it. So these questions, just so you know, they're subject to change. I've had some constructive criticism when it comes to them from some of my friends because they are out of order or they don't make sense. But if anybody ever listens to this, just give me some feedback in the comments. Let me know which questions are good, which questions are bad, which questions you would ask, why do I have certain questions, you know, what your answers to those questions are. You know, some of them end up being a little redundant, which I think sometimes can't be helped, but generally I think it covers, they cover all of the bases to kind of help us understand, or help me understand, all of us understand, how we feel about these games, and what the best parts, what the worst parts are. So, you know, anyway, let's just get to it. First question. What is the best thing about this game? Clearly, the best thing about this game is the combat. It feels good, it's visceral, it looks great. The flesh system is the tits McGinley, you know, whatever that means. It is great, it's unique, and any game moving forward, especially a melee combat-focused game, should have something similar to it because it really makes the combat come alive. Second question. What is the worst thing about this game? The worst thing about this game is the story. There's nothing interesting about it. It's not told well. The acting is okay. It's not terrible. I mean, I've heard worse voice acting. If you ever played Lost Ark, that's some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard. But, you know, when it comes to the story, I just didn't care about what's going on. It feels almost like a story that was ripped out of some game from like the 1990s or the early 2000s. The quality behind games is much higher now. The talent behind games is much greater today. And back then, you have these nonsensical things happening where I don't want to give too much away if anybody does care, but things happen and you're wondering, what am I listening to? How did this person get there? Here, where, wherever? And you just end up, when something just isn't working for you, you just end up nitpicking everything about it. Like, why is this happening? Who is this person? It's not a good story. There's plot holes. It's completely uninteresting to me, and it took every fiber of my being not to hold the skip button just to be able to, get through this. I still wanted to listen to it, but I just didn't care. Third question: what innovations did this game introduce? Like I said before, the innovation this game introduces is the flesh system. The combat's the best thing about this game, but the flesh system is what makes the combat the best thing about this game. It's the one thing that this game does differently, and more games should adopt this system moving forward. Especially games with melee combat, they would easily benefit from it. It makes it more realistic, it makes it more visceral, it makes it feel better. And visceral is the best word to describe it. It is, like I said, you hit an arm, the arm falls off, head falls off, slashes appear where they should, cutting legs off. It is, any game moving forward should have something like this, if it's not copyrighted. Because now what they do nowadays is they come up with an idea, they copyright it, now no other game can use it. So maybe that's happened, I don't know, but any game moving forward that has melee combat should have some system like this involved. Alright, the fourth question. If this game was a movie, what Oscar would it get? Is it Oscar worthy? Now, I like movies a lot, so that's why I bring this up. I know there are Game Awards. The Game Awards, it's like the same thing, essentially. Art direction instead of production design, best narrative instead of best writing. Everybody knows the Academy Awards. The Game Awards, I don't think even us gamers really know all of the categories. They tend to split the games up, best indie game, best action RPG, and I feel like it starts to just kind of chop everything up a little bit too much. So when it comes to this game, I don't know if this game is necessarily Oscar worthy, but I feel like if this game is going to get an Oscar in anything, it's got to be the production design. If it were a movie, the environments look great, they're detailed, the graphical fidelity is high. Maybe you could argue like special effects or something with combat or the flesh system, which would be an interesting way of looking at it. Look, it's not Oscar worthy, it's probably more like Golden Raspberry worthy, but it could get an Oscar. If it was to get an Oscar, it would be either for the production design or the special effects. So, next question. What is the most graphically impressive part of this game? We just kind of covered that. It's redundant, but the world environments are the most impressive part graphically, the visually, and we don't need to get too much more into that. Next one is, which gameplay system from a design point is the most impressive? This question is more from a system design standpoint, whether it's an RPG or a leveling system or some kind of mechanic. I imagine the flesh system that we talked about before could fit into this, but that's not really what I mean, because the flesh system isn't a gameplay mechanic. It's something you're not actively using. It's something that sort of happens in combat. But I guess from a gameplay system standpoint, I just don't really know what's impressive. I think that's why I didn't like this game, because the skill system wasn't that interesting, the modding system wasn't that interesting. Even in the neighborhood watch mode, those talents aren't that interesting. You run around, you kill zombies, you collect materials that aren't that interesting. I guess you could make an argument for the curveball system, because you can have two of them equipped and you kind of switch between them and they're on a cooldown, so you're not crafting and running out of them. Maybe gathering materials to craft them, that would have made the game more interesting, but there could have been something more there, where instead of just weapons, they could have added armor. They could have added crafting your own weapons or armor instead of modding weapons that you find. So that's that one. How good is the soundtrack for this game? The music doesn't really stand out, but the menu music in the main menu screen is pretty good. I don't know if it's licensed or not. But it sounds like a song from somewhere. But it's catches you. You know, it's not something that you would, you know, like if you ever played The Outer Wilds, the song that you hear in the beginning of that game, you turn that game on, and you're like, I'm going to be playing something pretty special when you hear that music. Obviously, that the menu music in Dead Island 2 isn't that way. And there's a couple times, you know, when I was playing the game where, oh, that music is okay, but it doesn't really stand out. You know, the sound design is pretty good, but it's not something that also stands out. You know, it does its job. Should this game get a sequel, prequel, or a remaster? If it has one, which is better? Well, it could get a sequel. I don't know if it will. I don't know how you put a game out 14 years later, and most outlets and people are saying it's good despite the fact that it was in development hell. It's sort of like, you know, the tallest kid in kindergarten situation. But the sales number, the last time I checked, the sales number, and I could not believe this, were around 10 million. So it sold extremely well. Surprised the balls off of me, to be honest. But a sequel would really need to expand greatly on what they have here. You know, bigger maps, deeper skill and mod systems to give the game some depth and longevity. I think ultimately that Dead Island 1 is better, and that Dead Island Riptide is better than this game too. So there's that. This is an interesting question. What if another developer made this game? What if Deep Silver gave the reins back over to Techland? Now, from what I understand, Techland did do some work on it, but Deep Silver and Techland couldn't agree on the direction. Maybe Techland wanted to add the parkour element to it, which is what they did in Dying Light. But what if Techland, they went back and they made Dead Island 3 after making Dying Light and Dying Light 2? And that game series, by the way, you know, I'll bring it up again in another question. That would be interesting to see what they would do with Dead Island 3 after what they've done with Dying Light. You know, obviously the parkour they would remove to separate the two. They're similar games, obviously, but what could they do with Dead Island going back to it that would be interesting? Would they expand? I mean, Dying Light had, you know, interesting skill trees and really cool mechanics. Like you can cover yourself up in zombie slime and kind of stealth through them. You know, it would be interesting what they would do with Dead Island 3. That could be great. You know, big open world like in Dying Light 2. But yeah, it's that's an interesting. I'd like to know if anybody listens to this what they think about that. So throw that down below. Is this game the developer's best one? Well, Dambuster Studios only has one other game that I know of, and that's Homefront Revolution, which I've heard of but never played. It doesn't have the greatest reputation. I think it was fairly buggy. But look, I mean, it's a contest between two knuckleheads, you know. I guess technically Dead Island 2 is probably their best because it released in a more stable state, unlike Homefront. And this is probably not saying much, but they're not setting anybody's underwear on fire here. So let's see. Does the game story have any plot holes or nonsensical game mechanics? Well, the story I don't care about. It's filled with ridiculous things, and there's no way I could even begin to tell you if there were plot holes because I wasn't paying attention at all. I did mention before that there were plot holes, and I can't even tell you. I knew that they exist, but I can't even tell you what they are because I've forgotten already. And as far as nonsensical game mechanics, I don't think there's anything like that. I mean, the game is not that robust in order for it to have nonsensical game mechanics. So which section of the game is the most fun to play through? The most fun to play through is to just go to the neighborhood watch mode. It wasn't with the game at launch. It's something they added later on. So at launch, I would have liked this game a lot less than I do now. But I'm playing this on, I played this on Game Pass, and the game was just recently added. It's $12.98 with tax for Game Pass on PC, and the cheapest way to play this game is the best way to play this game. This game was built for Game Pass. Which section of the game is the least fun to play through? For me, the sewer is the least fun to play through. I mean, is there any game when you're in the sewers and it's good? I can't think of a single game that I had in the sewers. I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm in the sewers. This is amazing. I'm having a great time. You know, I'm in the sewers. This is amazing. You know, any sewers thing in any game is complete shit. You know, pun intended. So, slap me across the face if you guys can remember another good sewer section in game. Let me know. I mean, maybe Arkham City had sewer, but I think that was probably the shit part of that game too. But anyway, the sewers, that was the worst part of DI2. It's just not fun, but it's short, thankfully, so there it is. Should this game be multiplayer or single player? Now, this is a question where only certain games can fit. This question is for like a game like God of War. Should it be multiplayer? Should it stay single player? You know, should the game has both, but should have focused on one? Ironically, like DI2 to me could only be multiplayer with side modes and no campaign, and I'd be happy with that. You know, I probably would have enjoyed the game more if it was just the neighborhood watch mode, and it was, you know, $12 on Game Pass and just that mode. I'm like, oh, this was worth it. You know, so I would recommend playing the game multiplayer, not single player. But you know, a game like this, if you didn't launch it with a single player, you know, at a lower price point, people would have been like, "F this, I'm not dealing with this." But anyway, any wild takes or pet peeves concerning this game? All right, get ready to roll your eyes so hard they disconnect from your brain, because I can nitpick the crap out of this game. I don't like the backtracking. It felt awkward from the beginning, where you're like, oh, I can't go here now, come back later, here's a bunch of zombies that'll kill me in one hit. You know, this isn't Zelda. This game doesn't need that mechanic. And a lot of times you're trying to find a key to something, but there's also times where you're trying to find a fuse. So very early on, I thought I had to locate the fuse. I just wasn't finding it. But I can't find one. But generally, you need to buy them from a trader instead of looking for them, like the game suggests, because you have to find keys. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Some parts of the combat, like I mentioned before, you know, zombies smacking you even though you're attacking them, can't stand that. The screaming zombies are annoying in every game. I don't like how when you press the back button, you don't get the map or your character or your skill cards. I don't like how it's a menu, like when you hit the start button or whatever Xbox or PlayStation calls that button these days. The story was written by a 6-year-old with emotional problems. You know, there's a lot to pick at this game. It's one of those games where you play it, you know, at least for me, and I'm just picking at it the whole time. So, you know, let me know what your guys' peeves or crazy takes are. What game should you play right after this game? That answer is easy. Go play Dying Light. Because that is a good zombie game. Techland made it so, you know, that it's the Dead Island 1 guys. They took that game, their ideas from Dead Island 1, and expanded upon them. There's a zombie game out there, to me, that just hasn't been made yet. It's a cross between Dying Light, Grand Theft Auto, and Borderlands, and maybe Fallout 4 with the scavenging building system in it. And it just hasn't come out yet. But listen, you Frankenstein those games together in the right ways, and that's going to be a good one. But I highly recommend Dying Light. Not Dying Light 2, Dying Light. That was a great game. What is the overall theme of the game, and what was learned? The overall theme of this game, there's not some kind of storytelling here that's high level, but what I get from this game, you know, separate from some kind of story theme, is that for every good thing, there is a bad thing. For as fun as the combat can be, there's no depth to it. The story is tongue-in-cheek, but it's really not that funny or good. The mods, okay, you can mod your weapons, and there's perks, and there's built-in perks to the weapons, but they're also uninteresting. It's just a mediocre experience, and I learned absolutely nothing other than I'm glad that Game Pass exists. Does this game need more support, or was it supported well? They added the Neighborhood Watch and a New Game Plus, and the Neighborhood Watch mode is the best way to play the game. You could argue that it was supported well, but does it need more support? It's still buggy. I came across a lot of bugs. But really, what support that it needs, you just can't add to the game. Although Cyberpunk did that actually, so it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely. I think the core experience of the game is flawed because it needs to be fleshed out as an RPG. So unless they added some depth to the game, there's really nothing left to say. And the last question. What makes this game memorable? And to me, what makes it memorable is probably its only innovation, which is the flesh system. That was a great design choice. It was implemented well. More games should have it. But that's about it. You play this game, you're like, yeah, this was something I did. It comes across, you know, I don't know if you ever played Watch Dogs. I remember that game. I played it. Will I ever play it again? Don't think so. And that description of the game segues into my final thoughts about it. Like I mentioned it before, you know, I like movies, and I think the movie system or the movie rating system is the best system. I think we can all agree that the game system, this out of 10 bullshit, it just doesn't work. It's just too big of a range. Movies have a very simple one. 1 star, it's bad. 2 stars, it's average. 3 stars, it's good. 4 stars, it's a masterpiece. And you can provide a half star to nudge it in a direction. For instance, if a game is really bad, that's 1 star, but there was this good mechanic in it, so you can give it 1.5 stars. Pushes it a little bit more because you're recognizing something that was good in this sea of shit. So to me, ultimately, Dead Island 2 is a 2-star game. It's an average game. For every good thing about it, there's a bad thing. So it kind of balances itself out. And in that regard, I could see people playing this game and thinking it was a good game. And I could see people playing it and thinking it was a bad game. There are a lot of things to like, but there's a lot to dislike. It doesn't do much new, doesn't do much interesting, but it's also not poorly constructed. It's not too buggy, although it is buggy. It looks great. The combat's good. Systems function how they should for the most part. And they added a post-launch fun game mode. In addition to, like I said, the Flesh system, which is an innovative game design system. So I know my thoughts on it aren't all positive, but I did have fun with it. I enjoyed the combat, but just ultimately, I'm not going to spend too much time with this game. Because, as much as it can do right, it just does all of these other things wrong. And there's really, at the end of the day, there's just not enough depth to keep you invested in it. To really get, when you get a really good RPG and you just get into it. I can't wait to get home. I can't wait to play. I'm going to try this skill, and if I do this, I'm going to try and get this item. That's what really good RPGs can do. Really good story games. I can't wait to get home to just play the next part. I have to know what happens. Those games get you invested. And Dead Island 1, I was invested because I liked the skill trees. I liked the build craft, the synergy between the weapons, the mods, and the skills. And this game just doesn't have that. They wanted to keep it simple. They got this game out the door. I respect them for it. It does have some fun, but the next one, they gotta add some depth to it. So, this pretty much wraps this one up. This is the first one. So, again, let me know what questions you liked, which ones you disliked, which ones you'd like to see, what your answers are. And hopefully I can find the time to put these out, at least once or twice a month, because it's fun. It's fun to do, to sit here and just yammer on about something that, games which I love. It's my movies were my first love, but games are my true love. And playing a new game, getting into some new game comes out, and you're just so excited to just sit there and get into it. Is there any better feeling? Maybe, when your kid graduates high school or something like that, or college, but a close second is just breaking into that new game. You just can't wait to get down on it, get into it. So anyway, like this, subscribe it, share it, if anybody listens to this at all, and I'll catch you in the next one.